Hi guys, hello everyone. So today this is episode one of 5 questions in under 10 minutes for MRCOG Part 2, XUPS Part 2, or any other specialist examination prep in OPS-Gynae. So let's begin. Our first case is that of a 35-year-old primary gravida, which she does not have any risk factors, with a reassuring CTG, fully dilated since the past 2 hours, with a station of +1, having regular uterine contractions, and epidural's been cited since the past 4 hours. How long before intervention is required? Now, always focus on the last question: how long before intervention is required? So, since she has epidural, since she does have an epidural and she's been dilated for 2 hours, so we know she's a primary gravida, so maximum amount of time that she can go is 3 hours, so we will wait 60 minutes before an intervention is required. Now, if this same question had said what would you do right now, then you would say no intervention is required. Now, if the same patient was a multigravida who's been dilated since 2 hours with epidural, you would say instrumental delivery. Now, so remember that just by changing a couple of key things in the same question, you would say that it's the same question, but they tend to trick you like that. So just be mindful of that when you're reading the question. So yeah, so the answer here is wait 1 hour and then consider intervention. So this is the only table that you need to know. It's going to come in your exam. Definitely one question comes from this always. So if there's a primary gravida annulliparous without regional analgesia, maximum time is 2 hours, and if she has the epidural, a primary gravida with epidural, that would be 3 hours total time. Now, if the same thing is multiparous, if she's a multiparous and she doesn't have any analgesia, that will be a maximum 1 hour. You will give a trial of labor, and if she has the epidural cited, then 2 hours you can let her be, and then you have to make a plan for delivery. Question number two. So she's a 63-year-old female, para 4. She's been menopausal for the past 8 years, diagnosed with breast cancer since the past 2 years, and underwent bilateral mastectomy, currently on tamoxifen since the past 2 years. And she's presented to the emergency department with new onset vaginal bleeding. So, management plan. So, if I have to summarize the entire thing, so she's a 63-year-old postmenopausal lady, history of breast cancer, on tamoxifen with PMB, new onset. So this is a definitive. You need to definitely see what's going on inside, because she's at a high risk of developing endometrial cancer. In this case, you would directly jump to hysteroscopic guided biopsy. I know a few of you would consider option A, which is a transvaginal ultrasound scan. But this is the normal pathway. If you don't have any risk factors and this is your first time bleeding, then you get the scan and check for endometrial thickness, right? But you don't do that when the patient is on tamoxifen and has breast cancer and has new onset PMB, because the ultrasound would show cystic hyperplasia normally. Empirical treatment with tranexamic acid and mefenamic acid is not the management plan for postmenopausal bleeding. This is for dysfunctional uterine bleeding in the reproductive age group. And again, we need to see inside and do a definitive full thickness biopsy of suspicious areas, so that will be directly through the hysteroscopic guided biopsy. So this is pretty much the same thing. So the key point is postmenopausal bleeding with tamoxifen, which is a selective estrogen receptor modulator. We know that it acts on the breast cancer cells and reduces the estrogen receptors, but it increases the estrogen efficacy on the uterine walls, and that's why you could have postmenopausal bleeding with it. And the key word here is cystic hyperplasia of the endometrium, which puts them at increased risk of developing endometrial cancer. So now we have our question number three is a 27-year-old female. She is a para 2 plus 2. She does not, none alive. Two miscarriages at 14 and 20 weeks. So these are second trimester losses. And two preterm births at 25 and 30 weeks. All right. So, and karyotyping of products of conception, I think, of the miscarriages is normal. Maternal screening for which infectious agent is performed. I know the first thing that we think about when we think of miscarriage, second trimester miscarriage or preterm birth, is cervical incompetence. But they're not asking for that. They're just asking which infectious agent would pretty much cause a second trimester loss or a preterm birth. And the only thing that you need to know about that is a bacterial vaginosis. It goes undiagnosed, unidentified, doesn't get picked up on screening that often, and doesn't get treated as well. So this is a recurring cause. Now, cytomegalovirus, rubella, and toxoplasmosis are once off agents that can cause a miscarriage or a stillbirth or abnormalities, but they don't really cause recurring problems, right? So, bacterial vaginosis is the culprit for spontaneous rupture of membrane, preterm birth, or a second trimester loss. And when you have cytomegalovirus, which is the most common cause of neurodevelopmental impairment. Now, so when they want you to pick cytomegalovirus, they will mention the periventricular calcification, sensory neural hearing loss, and neurodevelopmental impairment in a neonate. So this is when you go for a cytomegalovirus infection. For rubella, they will put in cataracts and heart disease. And um, definite, and again, these the chance of having recurrence with these infections is rare, and it doesn't happen often, right? Again, toxoplasmosis, they could throw in the word cat lady, and that's when you could consider toxoplasmosis as the culprit. And these are part of your torch screen. Bacterial vaginosis is not. So again, you need to be mindful of what the question is asking you. A 20-year-old Primi gravida is a which she's a African origin. So this is different, right, from our other questions. Presented to the antenatal clinic at 10 weeks gestation for a routine booking visit. Which additional investigation would be performed in her case? So you need to know in this case what are the routine bloods and which is the different one. So we have in options hepatitis C, HIV, sickle spleen, and beta hcg. Now beta hcg is not part of your routine blood test, and hepatitis C is not. Hepatitis B is, hepatitis C is not. HIV is part of your routine test, so the only you have to decide between A and C. Now this is where that additional knowledge will kick in, that its sickle screen testing is done for all African origin ladies, because 1 in 4 African women are affected with sickle cell disease, and it's an autosomal recessive condition. Again, another exam question that can be asked. So sickle screen is done, and what you need to know, that what are the routine blood tests. So that will be a full blood count, a blood group, your rhesus group status, along with HIV, syphilis, and hepatitis B. So you need to know HIV, syphilis, and hepatitis B are from the infectious screen that are done. Now, the same thing could have been asked for a patient who has history of family history of thalassemia or something, and then you would have picked a thalassemia screen instead of a sickle cell disease if that showed up in your options, right? So yeah. Question 4. Question 5. In which condition is breastfeeding contraindicated? So this is basically they could put up a whole scenario, and then they just could just in the last line ask you, is she safe for breastfeeding or not? So can we do it in breast cancer, mastitis, HIV, or hepatitis C? So the only correct answer is HIV. And even in HIV, it's you could consider breastfeeding, but it has strict protocols, and you need to do the titer monitoring as well. For mastitis, actually, it is encouraged to do what do you call it, breastfeeding, right? To help with the accumulated blood that's in the breast. So these are the 4 I's that you need to know about breastfeeding. So in contraindications, right? So in which infections don't you do it? It's HIV, herpes, when there's an active ulcer on the breast. Human T cell lymphoid virus, an active and untreated syphilis and TB would be a cause for breastfeeding contraindication. You have if the patient is having imaging, or if they're ingested drugs like chemotherapeutic agents, amiodarone for hypothyroidism, cocaine, or heroin, then you would not give them the consider breastfeeding for those. And if the infant has galactosemia, in all those conditions, again, you the breastfeeding is contraindicated. And but again, in all other conditions, contraindication to breastfeeding is rare, and so we mostly encourage all women to breastfeed their children, right? So that's all from us from our episode 1. If you like what we do, just like us, and we'll continue doing this and follow us. for more. Thank you.